record on this computer. All right. So we should be recording. And hey, everybody, welcome to the September series of the DNU Tech virtual meetups. Our theme today, education evolution. And yeah, let's try to dabble with this idea of like analog versus digital formats. We'll get into that a little bit more. But of course, for everybody that's going to be joining us on the recording, today we have Lee Gaddis with us, founder of Gaddis Gaming. Kovone Hunt, hopefully he's going to join us here. He did send me a message about an hour ago and said he's on his first day of a new job and they had him there longer than he expected. So hopefully he will chime in with us. But we also have Kari Kamani Turner, Executive Director of Kovone Young Foundation. So, hey guys, thank you so much for joining me and joining us this evening. And Murphy, M. Ridley, and any of our other audience members that join us, thank you for coming through this fine Wednesday evening, this late summer evening. And just to go through our quick agenda, what we're going to be talking about the next 50 minutes or so, I want to give you a quick background and history of what DNU Tech is, why we're doing this, tell you about our sponsors, and give you a little background about myself, how I'm here, why I'm here, talking with you today. And we'll try to do a little quick networking and community building engagement activity for a few minutes, and then we'll jump in. We'll talk a little bit about today's theme, our education evolution, and then I want to talk with our featured guests particularly. So again, we got Kari with the Kovone Young Foundation, and we have Lee with Gaddis Gaming. Again, hopefully Kovone will join us. And at the end, we'll hopefully have some time for some question and answer, and then go on with our closing remarks, say our goodbye. And welcome, Victor. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to mute you until we get into more of the question and answer portion. But hey, hopping into some DNU Tech background and history. So DNU Tech was founded in 2010. Over the years, we've built up over 2,300 members, and we are a networking and resources for the startup community of Detroit and Southeast Michigan. And we're here to encourage and highlight entrepreneurial startups in the region, but we're also kind of expanding into more social impact projects and nonprofit as well. And yeah, so we're here to collaborate, provide meaningful insights into the ecosystem, just to see what different projects people are working on and try to make some connections. The hopes are that from creating this content, we can make new connections that can empower people to activate their potentials or create their projects of the future. So I gotta thank our sponsors, TechTown Detroit, which is a co-working space for entrepreneurs in Detroit. Let's see here. Yeah, so they have all sorts of programs if you want to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And also we have the Accelerate for Kids Foundation. And the Accelerate for Kids Foundation sponsors tech education programs for the youth in Southeast Michigan. I'm actually a technology instructor with the Accelerate for Kids. And then finally, we have Kerr Russell, who's the longest standing or the oldest law firm in Detroit. And they do have intellectual property lawyers. I always bring that up. I think that's most relevant to our community here. A lot of inventors, a lot of people creating new ideas, new intellectual property. So Kerr Russell, our sponsor as well. If you ever need some help with patents, trademark, copyright, that type of thing, I recommend reaching out to that. But again, thank you to all our sponsors. They make this possible. And yes, thank you, sponsors. So hey, my name is Jack Carrick. I am the host and co-organizer of DNU Tech, and I studied engineering at Wayne State University. And after graduation, I went into the DTX program, or Detroit Technology Exchange program, at TechTown Detroit. So that was last year. I founded my own company coined Motor City MedTech, but I've disbanded since then. But I'm still really interested in learning about entrepreneurship. And that's kind of what has led me to being the host here of DNewTech. And finally, the pivot I've made in my life, most recently, I started a graduate program at Wayne State College of Engineering to be a high school math teacher. So education is something that's a big passion of mine. And I'm trying to connect education and technology. Mathematics is empowering, and how can we show students how's that relevant to their lives so they can go and make a difference. So, all right. So, hey, there are a few of us here. So let's do this quick networking and community building activity. So everyone in the chat, try to answer these 5 questions. Let's take maybe 5 minutes to do this. So just type in your first and last name, maybe grab a link to a social media that you communicate a lot through. And then, hey, what organization or business or company are you working with currently? What value can you offer to the DNewTech community? And how can the DNewTech community assist you? So let's throw this in the chat real quick and see what we can come up with. And I invite everybody to participate in this. Hello, Blair. Welcome, Blair. We are doing a quick networking and community building activity. We're just answering these 5 questions. If you want to input some of your information in here, share with the community, let them know who you are, what you're working on, what you can offer to the community, what you're maybe looking for that the community can offer you. It'd be great just to know a little bit about everybody here. All right, so with Matthew Ridley, if you don't mind me reading real quick. All right, he's a Twitter guy. He's on Twitter, and he's got Gaming Matt R. Okay, and then Milk Can LLC. Interesting. I'm gonna have to check that out. More gaming. All right. So my main company builds custom software, websites, mobile apps for businesses, SEO, digital marketing. Awesome. Okay. All right, here to support Lee. Cool. Then let's see, anybody else? All right, well, if anyone else wants to keep contributing here, you're welcome to do that, but otherwise, let's hop forward. So today, our theme is the education evolution. And I just got a couple questions for us to maybe think in the right direction here. So, how's traditional education evolving alongside technology? How do we utilize physical spaces and digital spaces for education in the COVID era? How do we ensure access to quality education for all? And finally, where do we fit in here as entrepreneurs? So, hey, before we get into this conversation about the education evolution, first I'd like to get to know a little bit more about Kari and Lee and kind of about their journeys, a little about their history and background, what's led you each to this moment in so if we could start with Kari and then go to Lee. So we have Kari Turner with us, and he's the executive director of the Coleman A. Young Foundation. And he also is big with communicate. He's a communications engagement leader, and he does a lot of external and internal communications as a director. And down here at the very bottom, there's a website you could check out as well, the Coleman A. Young Foundation. So CAF.org here, if you wanted to look more into that. But hey, Kari, thank you so much for joining us tonight and being with us. And I'm curious, could you tell us maybe some of the big stepping stones in your journey that has led you to becoming the executive director of the Coleman A. Young Foundation?
Sure. Thanks again for having me, Jack. And thanks. Shout out to Q too for helping to make me a part of this conversation. I'm kind of a non-traditional in this lane because I'm today functioning exclusively in the nonprofit sector, right? And Coleman A. Young Foundation is a 38-year-old organization. So to call this particular organization a tech savvy or a tech astute organization is a stretch. We're evolving very much, but I'm also a creative. I'm an author. I'm a performing artist. These days, I'm just a dad also, and I tend to put on a jacket and a shirt more often than I do pick up a microphone. But the mic stays nice. So to answer your question, I came to Coleman A. Young Foundation because I started my career in the service sector with United Way Community Services before it became United Way for Southeastern Michigan, and then with Detroit Wayne County Community Mental Health. And I worked there as a PR specialist and communicator. And then my journey kind of took me through education, through the nonprofit sector, through journalism. I ended up writing a couple of books and along the way writing about 400 plus articles for various magazines. So there's this blend of feature writing, focusing, and storytelling. And then around 2012, I felt like I really wanted to return to the service sector. And then Coleman A. Young Foundation became a part of my life. And for the last 8 years, I've focused on leading this organization, which was actually established and founded in 1982 by Mayor Coleman Young, Detroit's first African-American mayor, who took about $3 million of his remaining wealth and gave 2/3 of it away. Part of it was used to start this organization. We develop leadership among Detroit youth. We focus on scholarships, mentoring at the collegiate level, because many of our students are cycle breakers in their families and communities. So we help them to access the collegiate environment, navigate the terrain, and matriculate with as few hiccups as possible, right? But we also help to develop kids between 11 and 18 years of age, just helping them to craft a working plan for their lives. So there's, we try to expose them to college environments early, workforce development opportunities early. We do engage in some tech readiness on that level through some coding workshops, coding classes. Folks like Richard Grundy at Journey have worked with us before, and we've stood up some camps for kids and their families. And then we also along the way deal with life's issues and help these kids to just kind of mature in that vein. So I'm proud of the work that we're doing. And to that extent, the the pandemic has forced us to become a tech savvy organization, a virtual organization, because the vast majority of our kids now are engaging us at home. And now we're figuring out how to protect the integrity of the mission work, which we thought leaned or relied heavily on this person to person in-face interaction. And now we're learning how to preserve that part of our mission, which is our secret sauce, while leaning very heavily, leaning much more on and relying much more on technology, just like what we're doing now, to keep our kids engaged.
What age are students or the youth coming into the program usually?
At the youth development space, which is our real skills program, they connect with us around the age of 10 or 11, fifth grade, sixth grade. The college students come to us as high school seniors. And we usually get a heavy influx of inquiries from high school seniors because our scholarship is a substantial one. It's valued up to $20,000, and that spreads over 4 to 6 years. So it's a big boost. Sadly, as expensive as college is, it doesn't cover the full cost of college, but it's still an attractive support for kids to pursue, and they tend to be in our lives, in the foundation's lives, well into adulthood, because they become alumni after they graduate from college.
I wish we had Kovone here with us as far as on the scholarship end. Kovone has a startup called Play Smart, and they gamify the academic experience, and they target more of high school athletes.
Wow.
And
Okay.
based upon your academic performance, it puts you in the running for certain scholarships and whatnot. So yeah, I wish we had him here with us to kind of chime in on that.
Well, I sense an offline meetup coming.
Hey, and I would like to connect him with you two as we go forward.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned in this era of COVID, you've had the Coleman A. Young Foundation has had to become tech savvy. So can you tell us about what is maybe the most important tool that's helped you continue these connections with these young people and to allow them to have these opportunities for enrichment and to be exposed to educational opportunities. And like you said, you're, the youth that are part of this program, they're breaking a cycle. They're
Sure.
really going in a different trajectory for their families. That's very significant. So, what has been one or two tools that's allowed you to keep operating like that?
Virtual meeting technology is extremely important these days. Zoom, Google Hangout, those mediums are of the utmost importance, because that's what keeps us in their faces, right? And it doesn't top being in the same room and being able to shake hands and hug families, but it's something. And we're able to at least have conversations through those tech outlets, but also learn some things about ourselves, because many of our conversations now have a lot more. They center a lot more around mental health discussions, because we have to be open and honest with each other in this environment. So we hear kids and adults, facilitators and moms and dads talking openly about things that used to be stigmatized, especially in communities of color. So nobody refers to mental health issues as just being cases of crazy folks anymore. Now we're all talking openly about the benefits of therapy and sharing names and information and referrals and encouraging our kids to reach out. We're learning also that Zoom can really test the attention span of a teenager. So, our 2-hour sessions in person are now 1 hour max on Zoom. Our early morning starts on Saturdays sometimes are now 11 a.m. and noon starts, because in this environment, everybody's clock is off, right? And then on the operations side, just switching to simple technology. We used to like literally download QuickBooks software, for example, so just, nonprofits all over the city now are now pushing to understand the benefits of operating in online versions of some of these old technologies, moving everything to the cloud, which is old hat, but doesn't mean that everyone's done it. Some organizations are just slower to embrace those new ways of operating, and trusting the cloud to be a placeholder for key data and information. And that has also led us to question how much physical space we need, because we're not an organization that deals with high traffic. So now we are embracing some things that I and other board members have espoused for years. But this environment has now forced us to unanimously embrace the possibilities. So I know I answered your question and then added on to it, but it's an ongoing conversation and it's evolving for us. So it's useful.
What would you say is the most challenging obstacle? And you did mention some obstacles and some challenges, but what would you say in jumping into using more technology, using more of the virtual, um, like the meetings? And you mentioned students with having, it's hard for really all of us with our attention spans on
Sure.
this Zoom. So that's definitely an issue. But amongst the issues, what would you say is the most challenging?
I would say access
Access.
and user friendliness. Not every family has adequate technology at their fingertips. Most of our kids, for example, they have smartphones, but they don't necessarily have computers or systems at home that, or adequate Wi-Fi connections. So that's a challenge. And then for virtual meeting technology, etiquette, is a challenge. We're all learning that though, right? We're all learning when to put on a shirt with a collar and when to, rock a t-shirt or, and everybody is now learning these new rules of etiquette in the Zoom space, or, when is relaxation, when is it too relaxed, so we're learning those things too, how to properly protect your meeting, from potential hacks and all of those things, so, this is a brand new language for some of our kids and families particularly, and they're getting a crash course in it because they're looking for the proper hardware while they're learning what the proper conduct looks like when they're in certain spaces.
Is there a major goal that you're working on right now as executive director of the Coleman A. Young Foundation? If there's one kind of thing you're focusing on, what is that point of focus right now?
Hmm. Jack, honestly, this year I was listening to public radio the other day, and they were talking about DET's fundraising platform, and they said 2020 the theme of 2020 has become get by.
Mm.
And that's where we are. We feel very fortunate, blessed even, to be functioning. The fact that I can still cut a scholarship check to a kid uh, who's an online freshman right now to help with their tuition, that's a victory in itself. That we've been able to keep the doors open, even virtually. So our focus right now is just to remain healthy and viable through this year and get to stage 5 of the Michigan recovery process. Stage 5 is where we can all start to come outside and feel more comfortable within, maybe within 6 feet of each other or less, um, and then we can start to figure out what normal feels like in this new environment. Perfect example, if you guys think back to 2001 when the towers came down, um, or to the 80s when we were all started when we were all mandated to rock seatbelts in our cars. It felt weird at first, not being able to drive without a seatbelt on, or not being able to walk a loved one to the terminal, to the gate, but we got accustomed to it, right? So we know that something coming out of this pandemic era is not going to be the same. And for nonprofits, there's some things that are going to change. These virtual meetings might become the norm. We may all realize that it's simpler to do it this way, and we may stick to it. And then we have to write the rules of engagement in this space. So we'll figure that out. But for now, we just want to get to a point where we can be hopeful when the holiday season rolls around, and we know we're looking at next year. We want to look at it as a realm of possibility still, and we'll get there.
Yeah.
We just gotta be tedious.
We'll get by. Persistence.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Hey, so Kari, if there's one thing that you could ask of the community, be it the entrepreneurial ecosystem or Detroit or Southeast Michigan, if you could ask for something from the community at large, what would that be?
Well, in this pandemic environment, financial support. We can't be shy about that. I've never been shy about that, but like most nonprofits, fundraising has been chopped at the knees this year. And, our annual fundraising breakfast was canceled. That takes place in May. But that's also the time where we introduce our new scholar class to the community at large. So we've got incoming freshmen who don't feel valued the way past classes have, because the news cycles weren't focused on education the way they normally were during the graduation season and prom season, right? We were all focused on staying alive, and unfortunately we were counting losses, during those months. But us and then, for us, we normally are busy asking for new and sustaining monthly givers via our website. So I have to use opportunities like this to invite people to get to know us and give us some support. Visit that website, cafe.org, and you'll see immediately what we're about and how you can support us. And we can't wait to meet folks and say thank you to folks, but we also are stepping outside of our boundaries this time. And we want folks to know that too. This is also a time of heavy unrest. And even though most 501c3s are bound to be apolitical and not skirt certain issues, we have to address the Black Lives Matter movement. We have to address police brutality, because most of our scholarship recipients are hopeful young people of color, like myself. And they need to know that we see them as well, even in this era, and as a person who has himself been a victim of police brutality twice in life, that's just a rule that we're going to have to work around, so we have to make sure that our Black students, our Latino and Hispanic students, our Asian, our Asian Pacific students, our Native American students and our Mexican students are recognized and acknowledged and seen and understood, in this environment. And we have to let them know that we still expect their level best. We still expect excellence in this midst, attention to detail, and we want the community to know that. So we still have the audacity to launch a capital campaign in this environment, which we're doing as we speak, and roll out new collateral material and show those faces. Our founder said, 20 years after I'm gone, people should not think of Coleman Young's face when we say Coleman A. Young Foundation. The same way we don't think of Henry Ford's face when we say Ford Foundation. We think of the people who benefit from those services, right? That's the point of a viable nonprofit. So we're going to keep doing our best to stay right there in that lane and work that pocket so that when folks come to us, even in this pandemic environment, we can still be mission focused and mission specific. So anybody who wants to support us, I thank you in advance, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you down the road.
Thank you, Kari. Yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned the just with the pressure of everything going on with the pandemic, with the social, the current social situation. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pressure for us as adults, let alone young people and young students that are really affected by this day in and day out. So we still got to perform, and it's really cool that the Coleman A. Young Foundation and organizations like that can still hold up our youth, hold up our students, and support them through this.
Right on.
So, hey, thank you so much,
Thank
Kari.
you too, man. Thank you too for your commitment to the educational process. You know, we need that. We need math teachers. We need men to teach math because they see and receive it differently when it comes from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Kari.
Yeah.
And I do want to turn it over to Lee Gaddy's here. Yeah, unfortunately, Kovone couldn't join us. I really wish he was here, but it's just not the way it turned out this time. But I would like to connect you all with Kovone going into the future. He's a great guy, and he really fits in perfectly with this conversation. He's got a cool startup called Play Smart, where they gamify academics and trying to get college or high school athletes to perform better academically so that they can achieve better scholarships and increase their chances of getting into better schools. So Kovone is not with us. So we are going to turn it over to Lee Gaddies of Gaddis Gaming. And hey, Lee, who's the art designer and lead designer as well. And yeah, I was looking at the website. I really appreciate your art. Yeah, I would like to know more about your artistic, uh, uh, your works and how that takes part in Gaddis Gaming as well. But Lee is also a community activist, and I saw a little bit of that on your LinkedIn, and I was reading through some of the papers that you wrote. It was really interesting. I want to go and give some more attention back to that. But for now, Lee, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here with us
Thank
on
you for having me.
this Wednesday evening. And hey, could you tell us kind of some of the major stepping stones in your journey that's got you to this point in creation of in your entrepreneurship with Gaddis Gaming? And can you tell us more about Gaddis Gaming as well?
Sure. So the road that got me here, I was a naturally gifted artist, but wasn't really disciplined. And so I went to apply for a job, and the guy said that you could never move into management because of the fact you don't have a degree. So even though I was skilled, I could draw, I could create anything on a piece of paper. Because I wasn't credentialed, I wasn't able to move into the workforce the way I wanted to. I had some freelance work out of high school, but I really wanted to be like, at Marvel or Disney, one of the big companies. And so I went and I applied at CCS, and my first semester they wouldn't let me in. So I went to Wayne State, really honed my skills, got a lot of my technique down, built my portfolio out, which was kind of weak at the time. It was just a lot of superhero stuff that I had been drawing, and then I went back and applied for the winter semester at CCS and was able to get in. Well, I was able to work with a lot of different people at the time that were like-minded, and we started a little comic book company called Red Door Comics, And right at the time we were getting ready to publish, there was a paper shortage. I don't even remember this in the 90s. There was a big spike in the price of paper, so we couldn't afford to publish except for 4 issues of our comic book. Um, and so I started. I was asked if I would mentor some younger people that were coming in, because CCS was a pretty much predominantly white college, and I think there was only like 11 black people in the whole school. And so the next coming class, when I was getting ready to graduate, was coming in, and I was asked to mentor them. Well, that led to a lot of teaching activities for young people. I got a job in Ann Arbor at the Ann Arbor Art Center teaching illustration and design there. And then I noticed that the kids were coming to school in Ann Arbor. I don't know if you guys remember quarter-inch floppy disks. The kids at that time had floppy disks, and when I was coming back to Detroit, I'd turn on the news, and they would on my train ride back, because I was taking the train between Ann Arbor and Detroit. I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about kids not having toilet paper and books in the school. So right there, I could see the divide in education between the kids I was teaching at Ann Arbor and the kids that were going to school in Detroit. My homework, if I was in Ann Arbor, was on a disk. Everything I needed was on a computer. I could stick it in. I could do the work, type it up, bring it in, did it into the teacher. The teacher could put it in his computer, check it. Everything was done. And in Detroit, we were having this conversation around, was a school going to have toilet paper in the bathrooms and books that were 20 years old? So I could see the wealth divide, the educational gap looming there. So my response to that was not to become a teacher in the Detroit public school system, but to open up a cyber cafe to give my community access to computers. Because right on the corner of Woodward and Warren, there was a T1 line. This is when everybody, remember 56 Bud dial-up modems?
Yeah.
Remember those days, right? Maybe you get a connection over the phone. Well, I was sitting on the fastest internet connection you could possibly have outside of the military. And so Kinko's went out of business. I rented that space. I opened up Alpha Bay Cyber Cafe, and there I was able to teach people how to use the internet for their benefit. And at the time, there was a big fight around whether the internet was going to be for educational purpose and education, or whether it was going to be commercialized and taxed, right? So that was the rub right there. But I knew that we could not live in a society where one group of people had access to the internet, right? You could have anything that is knowable could be known at the touch of your fingers, and another group of people are arguing about what type of tech books they would have in their school. That was not going to be a society that was going to allow people of color and poor people to move up and out of their situation. So my solution was a commercial solution. It was to take the Kinko's facility, turn it into a cyber cafe. And my proudest moment when I opened up, I had that establishment for 5 years, and I was put out of business by eminent domain. That was by the state, came in and said, you can no longer be in business here, and took it all away from us. And they opened up the computer labs over at Wayne State after I got put out of business. But my proudest moment was when one of our seniors came in and he said, my grandkids have bought me this computer. Can you show me how to use it? And he brought the box in. It was a computer in a box. So I opened it up, and at the time the computers had a sheet where everything was color coded. You know, your purple went in for your mouse, your blue went in for your keyboard, so on and so on and so forth. So I walked him through it. I set him up. I showed him how to do it. And I said, look, here's solitaire. Solitaire is not for you to play a game. It's used on every computer for you to learn how to click the mouse, how to maneuver a mouse, right? You click solitaire, right, to move it. And so my proudest moment was having him set up the computer, go home, be able to get online and interact with his grandchildren through the computer. That to me was the beginning of a road of being able to close that technology divide, and also to realize that people had an opportunity. If you weren't able to go to Wayne State, you were still able to come in and use a computer, get a class, learn how to use Windows, learn how to use Microsoft Word, and all those type of things, And so that lasted until we were put out of business by eminent domain. I went back to to commercial art. I've been doing freelance commercial art ever since. And then it was a Veterans Day, and I was at my grandparents' house, and we were watching a movie called Battle of the Bulge. And my grandfather said, "Oh, those are the wrong tanks that they're using." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, Granddad, how do you know?" And then my uncle said, "Because he was there," right? So here was history, right, that I knew about. I knew about World War II. I knew all about the Wehrmacht and the Nazis and Hitler and all of that. But I didn't know that a member of my own family had participated in World War II, right? And
Wow.
so that stuck in my head for a long time. And I said, well, if I don't know that history, how much other history is not known, right? Here we are celebrating Veterans Day and Memorials Day, but we are leaving out some of the most heroic people to serve in our country. Uh, and so, how do you remedy that? You know, how do you educate the Black community to the services that have been offered? Right? There's tons of books written. You can go to the library. There's tons of stuff. There's tons of stuff online, but it's not as inundated as other things, right? You know, we're bombarded. Certain things are pushed our way, and other things are kept from us, and you have to go get it. So I was thinking, if I put all of this stuff in a history book, nobody's going to really read it, right? It's not going to make it through the educational system because, you know, there's tons of stuff out there. You have to go to a truth bookstore or something like that if you really want to get real history books. And when I was at school in the library, a kid came in. He asked for the autobiography of Malcolm X, and the administrator at the time said, "We don't have it." And I'm like, I'm standing there, I'm looking at where Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, E.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, the books are there, but they're telling the Black students that Malcolm X is not there, right? And I'm like, well, if other people are in control of your access, they're gatekeeping to your information, you're never going to be able to get it. So I decided to take Hero by Design Studio, which is the parent company of Gaddis Gaming, and I decided to make a product line dedicated to teaching history through games. Because what I realized at the Cyber Cafe is that kids won't spend any time reading a book, but they'll spend endless hours playing a game. And if I put that same information in a game, I can get kids to absorb it and not know that they're learning. So it's a process called edutainment, whereas education and entertainment interwoven. And so Gaddis Gaming product line is dedicated to that. It's dedicated to letting people of color and women know their history through this field that we're really not represented in, which is wargaming, right? And so from that, Gaddis Gaming product line was born. The first product that we created was the Gaddis Gaming TableTopper, which we have a patent on, and it takes any surface and creates a space for you to game in, right? Because most people didn't have tables the right size to play in, and it's a product for the general market. So we took the funding from that and we built our product line. Our first product was released 2 years ago. It's called Shattered Crown, and it focuses on the Harlem Hellfighters, which is the most decorated unit that fought for the Americans during World War One, and that was to me a glaring oversight because World War One was celebrating the 100-year since its end in 2018, but we did not have one mention of the Harlem Hellfighters or any movies have been made. You know, instead of Harlem Hellfighters, we get 1917, right? You know, we get movies about Britain. And when I turned on the TV and the History Channel, it was all kind of accolades about Germans and French and British, but not about the most decorated unit that spent 190 days on the front lines fighting for the Americans, right? That was completely erased. So what I've noticed is that we are being written out of history, and it's part of my mission to write us back in, and through the gaming process do that. So I can educate, I can entertain, I can correct some oversights from the omission of these people in history, so they are not forgotten. You know, the same way Coleman Young will not be forgotten. You know, so that we as a people can feel some pride and some honor and ownership of the country that we've fought, bled, and died for since its founding. And like Doc said last week, you know, why do we love America so much and it won't love us back?
Mm.
You know, to use a sports analogy. And so this is my way of opening up a much bigger world, including women and people of color, through the gaming market and education market. So we're going to produce a K through sixth grade version of the game where it's like flashcards where you hold up the card and then you can win points by naming what that is. So if you know what an M4 Sherman is, boom, you get a point. If you know who this person is, oh, this is Henry Johnson from the Harlem Hellfighters, boom, you get a point. So by using flashcards, and people are able to understand and know the contributions of women and people of color in American history, we can take some ownership and take some pride in it. And it shouldn't be cloistered just into a black intellectual type of thing. This should be common knowledge, the way you know who George Washington is, the way you know who Thomas Jefferson is, the way you know who Thomas Edison is. You know, the way you know who all these people are, you should be able to name black people besides Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King. You know, and that's the mission and goal of Gaddis Gaming, and that came through my artistic lens of being able to see things differently, to be able to problem solve differently, and that came from being at CCS, that being able to take a blank piece of paper and create anything on that canvas. And so for me, this is just another solution to a problem that we have in our communities, a problem that's systemic, and a problem that can be overcome if we think about things differently. And I think the educational focus of this, of 2020, is that we have a perfect opportunity to reset how we think education. Instead of having poor schools with black people in them and private schools with white people in them, or public schools with poor white people in them and private schools with rich white people in them, we can think about how do we uh, democratize education, right? And one of the ways that I did that last month was that I was part of a program called uh, Dream Wakers, where online kids get together and they ask questions of subject matter experts like myself, right? And so anything that you want to know is knowable. And you can find somebody who's an expert in that field, right? And so you can go, you don't have to have a go between, for physics, right? If you look at Khan Academy, you can start at 1+1=2 and go all the way up to theoretical physics if you're so inclined to do so. So kids aren't hamstrung or held back by the lowest achieving kid in the class. If you're bright and you want to achieve, if you can go online, anything that you want to know can be known, and you can work at your own pace, because the computer is infinitely patient, unlike a teacher. You can only ask a teacher a question and get it wrong so many times before their patience wear out. But a computer, you can do it over and over and over again until you catch it. And that would have been very beneficial for me back when I was in elementary, when I was back in grade school, because I was a visual learner, right? Until my math teacher drew a pie chart and said, you can take one slice out of 32, and that's 1/32. Then that clicked to me, right? Because it was a slice of a pie out of 32 pieces of the pie, and you took one out, and that's 1/32, right? But just writing 1/32 was an abstract. It was just two numbers on a board to me. It made no sense, right? But then once the visuals were added into it, it all started to click for me. Theoretical physics became much more interesting to me when the visual elements, when the formulas were made into visuals. Geometry, trigonometry, all those type of things, geometric shapes. As a visual learner, math came alive to me through that process. And I think that if we allow different ways for kids to learn, instead of just a teacher standing in front of a chalkboard writing numbers, if we allow those different pathways of learning, I think we will open up education and make it fun for a lot more people. And playing games to learn things is just another path to do that, to break down the barriers to education and to break down that resistance to learning. And I hope that that I can continue for many years to come to create products in the under the Gaddis Gaming brand to to bring education into classrooms and into homes, so that parents can do things with their kids and after school programs as a learning tool, and be able to link back with us online. And one of the things that we hope to do is to use the internet to be able to, to say, this is how you play the game. This is the things you can do with it. If you have any questions, you can talk to us directly. So those are the type of innovations that the internet brings, and that we as a company that's committed to making sure that our history is not forgotten or written out of the history books. And that's, I brought all those things that you mentioned together: my community activism, my art degree, my love for learning and education, and my wanting to pass this information on to others, so that what I know doesn't die with me, that this carries on the way Coleman Young has this Coleman Young Foundation. So when I get $2 million, I'll set up a Lee Gaddis Foundation to keep this legacy going. But we're on our way there. But right now, I give too much of my money away to hoard any of it. Unlike a $2 billion Jeff Bezos. One day I'll be worth that much. But I'll stop now, and I'll open it up for questions. So I know I have a tendency to run on at the mouth as a teacher.
Thank you, Lee. A question I have is, how has access to your games changed since COVID?
So what it has done, it's given me an opportunity to work with people who were too busy to work with me before. It has allowed me to refine the process. It has allowed me to bring in to my own skill set subject matter experts to help refine it, to really get it polished so that it's very receptive to the public. Because when you go out to market and advertise and put this in front of people, you want to make sure it's on a blue plate and not on a garbage lid, right? You want to make sure that you have the least amount of resistance to this product, so that people will receive it with open arms. One of the ways that I was socializing it was through the conventions. So I would go to conventions, I would set up a table, people would come over, oh, what is this? I'd show them how to play it, they'd love it, and they'd buy it right there. And so they would take it in to their communities, and then the next, I've been doing that for 3 years now. This would have been my 4th year, and really refining it down, getting people's feedback, right? They became my beta test group of like what to put in, what to put out, what people don't understand, because things that you think are intuitive, other people aren't getting at all. And until you have a large pool of people to beta test with, you don't get that feedback, and being able to see one of the things that we have that a lot of groups don't have are women gamers. So a lot of women and younger people come and they play our game because we make them feel welcome. It's not just the subject matter is the same with everyone, but it's creating a warm and welcoming environment, and making people feel welcome, and not making people feel stupid because they don't know anything. And there's a lot of people who are that we call Gragnards, that are like history, like everything has to be perfect. I literally sat down and had a conversation with a guy, or he was talking to me about the cycle rate of an MG42 machine gun for literally 15 minutes.
Wow.
I was like, dude, you are way too much into German machine guns. But that's the kind of pushback you would get, and that would probably turn some people off. But for me, it was an aha moment. I was like, so a lot of people aren't into this because because the people that are gatekeeping, the people that have been around playing these games, have set up a certain paradigm that pushes away other types of people, and that's mainly women and people of color, right? I remember one of those experiences I could share with you was when a guy asked me to play the War of Northern Aggression. And I was like, what is the War of Northern Aggression? Well, in the South is what they call the Civil War. Like when I was in school, I was taught the North fought the South because the South had slaves and we wanted to end slavery. But in the South, it's, the South was defending against Northern aggression over property rights, right? Mm-hmm. Leaving out the fact that property would have been people like me, mm-hmm. Right? And so when you have that kind of context and that kind of framing, that would push away a lot of people who may otherwise enjoy it.
Right.
And one of the aspects of the game too, not only just the history and learning, but also the hobby aspect of it. So if you have painting skills, it's collecting armies, it's learning the history, it's the hobby, it's the painting, the miniatures, it's learning the history of it. You know, so you have a lot of motor skills and artistic skills that can be refined and that can be focused on, because there's a lot of people who buy and collect miniatures that don't necessarily play games. You know, they buy it just for the meditation of painting the miniature. You know, so that's another aspect of it that a lot of people are into. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to work with veterans groups with our veterans who have PTSD, and use it as a means of income for them. So if they can't be in a place with loud noises or be around other people, they can paint miniatures and then sell those miniatures as a means of income for themselves. So and we would give it to them at cost to be able to do that. So that's another way that we're trying to give back to the community for the service that was there. So for me, it's one of the things that we did last year was we had a father came in, and he wanted to bond with his stepson. He had married the young man's mother. They had been married for 3 years, and he got really into World War I around 1918 because he was learning about it in school. And he wanted to know about my game, and so I sat down. I showed him the game. They both bought armies, and then every Thursday they would come in and play, and that would be their father-son time. So they would play the game. They would create their armies, paint their armies together, and then they would play each other. And they bonded over World War I. This was a young kid. He was like 13, 14 years old, you know, and and I thought that was really fascinating to see somebody interested, number one, in that time period, and number two, using it as the bridge to his stepfather. That's something that they could meet equal on, you know, because he wasn't into hunting and fishing, and the father wasn't into whatever the kid was into. But this was something they could bond together on. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities there to bring families together, to bring, you know, people who around some family time, right? Say every Thursday we're having a game night and this is what we're going to do, or hey, let's have a contest, see who can paint the most miniatures, you know, that kind of thing. And even self-improvement. Maybe I can start off and my painting's really bad, but I can get better over time, because it's a skill that everybody can learn. You don't have to be Vincent van Gogh to paint a miniature. You just have to learn these techniques and have some paints. And so I think there's a lot of things that can be done around that to bring people together and to be able to move this narrative forward around how do we learn, right? How do we as a community take advantage of COVID-19 and bring those people together? And I think that for us, the downside is that we can't go to conventions, because I really like meeting people one-on-one. But I think it has allowed me to work with more professionals to hone the game and get it out there, and using social media and using crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter to fund this project, because I can't, you know, do the sales that I would do by going to the conventions and getting into retail stores. So that's how the challenges have come about. You know, the good and the bad, right? It's a double-edged sword. The bad
You
part, we
know,
can't go to conventions. The good part is, you know, we've been able to get our product and out in other ways.
but you know, I didn't mean to cut you off, Lee,
No,
but
no, not at all. Go ahead.
I think the work you're doing is like extremely intriguing, and one of the reasons I made that comment earlier about looking forward to stage 5 is because we actually want to bring our kids in front of people like you.
Yeah.
We were just getting ready to launch a community engagement series when the pandemic hit, and by now we probably would have been 3 or 4 meetings in. Um, because we wanted to do something to reach beyond our youth and scholar base, and reach out to the community at large, and just give folks an opportunity to get in the room and start sharing information. You know, it's funny, man. I was born before my family moved to the east side. I was born in the Finkel and Leisure area,
Okay.
which is like the hood now.
Right. Yeah.
And some of the smartest people I have ever known in my life come from that neighborhood. Intellect is born out of you know, struggle and need, right? You know, so I mean, I grew up with that cliched group of people who, had they simply had different opportunities, could
Access.
probably access
Access.
access to guidance and training. You know, I mean, they could have taken some of those sensibilities that they got just from surviving in that environment and applied them in ways that literally changed the world. I mean, we were just reading today about Tyler Perry joining the Forbes list as the latest Black billionaire. That man used to sleep in his car.
Yeah.
All he did was leverage his position until his street sense met with the proper guidance and pathways, and boom, so
Opportunity. Yeah.
opportunity. I mean, so what happens when when these kids and these families get in front of a gentleman like you?
Yeah.
It's world changing.
Yeah, and it's access to opportunities. I was groomed very early. I went to a school called Jove that was on Dexter and Linwood. It's right off of Dexter and Linwood. It's right across from a fire station. And very early on, because I had a natural ability to draw and I
Right.
wasn't discouraged from drawing, I drew in kindergarten a Winnie the Pooh. No, it was first grade. My mistake. First grade. A Winnie the Pooh. And my teachers tagged me after that to keep drawing for the class. Like I drew, they had this, I don't remember, you remember butcher sheets, but it was paper that came out on these really super long rolls.
Yeah.
And they let me just draw on that roll. So I drew this giant Winnie the Pooh, and then I drew Godzilla, and then I drew a tank, and the paper would just keep coming and coming and coming. And then they would give my drawings to other students to color as a coloring book. And then they would cut those up and then put them on the wall. So very early on, I was commercialized at a very young age, like 6 years old, right? And then at about 12, I met an artist named Pat Broderick. And Pat Broderick was a cartoonist. He worked for Marvel Comics. And Pat said, and I said, wait a minute, somebody pays you to draw? All you do all day is draw, and somebody will give you money to do this? And it was off to the races after that. I would draw anything you got. And I had, like I said, I had little freelance jobs, but I didn't have a mentor until I was in my teens to take me in and say, no, you have to have pencils, you have to have Bristol vellum, you have to have a straight edge. There's skills that you have to learn to go with it. Just having the natural ability to draw wasn't enough, right? That you needed a skill set to go with that. And you needed some discipline to sit down at the table and draw something that was boring, like a house. Like one of the commissions I got was to draw a house for Century 21 that went into their catalog. So I had to sit there, take a Polaroid picture, and then draw the house from the Polaroid picture. The most boring thing I ever did, but it paid me $120.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was a teenager. So being able to, I think, get young people exposed to people like me, right? To say, this is how you can do this. This is a path that you can take. This is my experience. Now, how do you morph that into something that you can use right now, right? I know that in the mid 90s, I was very early on the internet about using it as an educational tool when nobody else was thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I knew that my community was falling behind, and this is something that I could do. I knew computers, and I think that if we can get young people around their interest, right? Because you just become good at what you want to do, and if you become good enough, somebody will pay you for it.
That's right. I was for me, it was that spark that the person gave you was fourth grade for me. My teacher was Lucille Moreland, and to your other point, you walked in her classroom, and above her door she had a photo of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X side by side, and she waited at the beginning of the school year until one of the kids in class asked her to tell them about these faces on the wall. And she said, I'll start with the end. They both got shot within 4 years of each other. He said, and then she said, pick a path. And I wrote about that. And she told my mother, that boy's going to be a writer. And that's what I ended up becoming. Just wrote about the curiosity of those divergent paths that ended the same way. And she used those photos to teach us all these life lessons about everything from the importance of ownership, Gaddis Gaming, right, to the importance of community engagement, Coleman A. Young Foundation, to the importance of innovative thinking and, thinking out of the box and excellence lying in the details, not at the finish line. And, all these jewels that in the fourth grade influenced a group of students that I ended up remaining in touch with to this day. So those, I don't even know if we're on topic anymore, Jack, but
No, exposure,
when it's
exposing
good,
young
it's good,
people for
but
education. Yeah.
the exposure is the key, right? And the ability to meet kids, or in the context of this
Hello.
conversation, meet interested or potential techies where they are,
I'm on
and,
my
and just give them
conference
an
with the
opportunity to
speakers right now.
apply. I mean, it's everything. It's everything. So even me, I'm probably the least tech savvy person in this conversation, but out of necessity, we're moving an entire organization toward it and embracing it, and we have to do it fast, because it is truly, in this environment, a matter of not only organizational survival, but educational opportunity and access for God knows how many lives that we have yet to touch. So yeah, those sparks, those connections are of absolute importance, and maybe we are on topic because this is all relative. It's all connected.
Yeah. So if you want to look at how other communities have field trips, right? They go to places. I remember one school talked about how they're on their European field trip. I'm like, really? You went to Europe as a class? So how do we get people who don't have those advantages to see opportunities beyond just the neighborhoods that they live in? I mean, I was in the barber shop and this guy said that he didn't have a male role model until he was 22 in his neighborhood. It was
Mhm.
all kids and mothers on
Yeah,
his whole block, right? And I'm like, that's impossible. How could you go all that time without ever having a male role model,
yeah,
right? But it's possible. And he said, oh, he called up his cousin. He goes, man, when was the first time you saw a positive black man in our neighborhood? He said, when I was 21. I
mm,
was like, what? So we take advantage the opportunities that 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 we have, and we think that everybody has those opportunities and they don't. And I think the younger you can expose kids to the possibilities of life beyond their neighborhood, I think the better it can be. And I think for me, if you put it in a game and make it fun to show them a much larger and brighter world and the people and activities, I think the possibilities are endless at that point.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I guarantee you, my son is going to ask me when we're done, what was that man talking about? Um,
What game he can play.
yeah, because while you were talking, I was on your website, and I,
Yeah.
I happened to have a picture of the TableTopper up.
Yeah.
He's going to draw. That's why he sat there and leaned, because something caught his attention.
Right.
But that's the way it starts.
That's that's
Happens.
how we have to start small and grow big. You have to,
Yeah.
so what I've done is I created a rule system also. So the tabletopper was a product, the miniatures are an ongoing product, and the other product that we worked on was the rules. It's the Gaddis Universal Assembly of Rules data system. And once you learn that rule system, you can play any of our games.
Hmm.
So if you want to play World War One, World War Two, you can go into sci-fi. And my big, and I'll reveal this now to you and this audience, is that we're gonna create a rule set and a miniatures line around Black people in the future, right? Because when I grew up reading Asimov and Heinlein, and all of these sci-fi authors, Black people weren't in those books. We
Yeah.
weren't in the future. It wasn't until Star Trek, till Nicole Nichols was on Star Trek, that we actually see a Black
Yeah.
person in the
Yeah.
future,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm dedicating our sci-fi miniatures line to just people of color and women, being intentional about including them in those stories. I'm not leaving anybody out. I'm just making
Cool.
sure I put some people in that have been left out for 50 plus years,
Yeah.
you know, and being intentional about it. And that comes from reading Octavia Butler,
Hey.
and the sci-fi, that she wrote.
Yeah.
So,
There's a
so
development deal around her work, I hear.
oh, it should be. It's
Yeah.
incredible stuff, and it's too bad she's not alive to share in it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's way better than J.K. Rowling's as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But
She's incredible.
we shouldn't wait for people to die for us to give them their accolades and their roses.
I
You
agree.
know, God rest Chadwick Boseman and the
Yeah.
exemplar that he's set up for Black actors.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
doing all that while struggling through colon cancer.
Yeah.
7 movies. I mean, for
Yeah.
crying out loud. So what? Who am
Incredible.
I to sit on my ass and not do all that I can do? If he can do that,
Yeah.
you know, what a sorry piece of work I am. So I
No,
think
no, no,
that
really. I hope he left some notes on how to build a circle that will keep your confidence the length of
right. Well,
'cause how did no one know?
because he kept it to himself, just kept it
I mean,
private.
yeah.
He came today. He put his nose to the grindstone. He did his work. I mean, if you look at the interviews for all the people that he worked with, they would say, he made me step my game up. He came
Yeah.
prepared. He knew how to do it. He
Yeah.
brought a gravitas to the role. I mean, everybody that he works with. And I hope that I can do that in the gaming community. I hope that I could be an exemplar to other people, that I can open up a door that other people can walk through, right? That they
Absolutely.
can say, you know what, Lee Gaddis did this. Why
Mhm.
can't I do it? Well,
Yeah.
you can. It's
Yeah.
no longer not for you. It's
Yeah.
no longer nobody like you is in that industry, so you can't be there. You
Well,
know?
let me lock step with you because um, our secret sauce has for the length of our existence not been the fact that we give scholarships, but it's the fact that we mentor kids at the collegiate level. So we've over 38 years introduced college students who enroll in college thinking just about graduating to fields from robotics to epidemiology. And because of that, we've got students or graduates to this day working in robotics and epidemiologists, walking around,
Right.
coming back and helping us and helping us to complete these circles. And to that point, I think the challenge that we're facing now is how to keep that secret sauce saucy, how to keep it effective when we can't touch you, when we can't hug you. There's always been a heavy
Yeah.
involvement of parents and parental influences
Sure.
in our programming. Some of those same single moms and dads who come to our programs use us as an opportunity to enhance their own parenting skills and uh, establish or reestablish in-home rapport with their children, because what happens when we become teenagers, whether you're
I
black, white,
hate
or
you.
other. Yeah, when you become a teenager, you become an alien in your own household. So
Right.
we're able to help put kids and parents on the same page and have these critical conversations with 10-year-olds about 529 plans and things like that, and get them to
Right.
actually think about dropping $25 a month toward their college education. But being in person and being able to put your hand on a kid's shoulder and have that conversation is so critical. So what we're looking at now is, okay, how do I do this on Zoom and still have the same impact, And what we're learning is that sometimes on Zoom doing this has the same impact, because when a 14-year-old is looking at my hand like this, they're feeling it,
Yeah.
one way or another. It may be more spiritual than physical at that point, but they're feeling it. And I actually give technology a lot of credit, for challenging us to step outside of our comfort zone and kind of come away from some of our more archaic thought processes,
Yeah.
and start listening. It's like I'm surrounded by, so a cat out of the bag. I turned 50 in November, and I'm surrounded by kids on this side of me who can sit down for 30 minutes and come up with an idea of from stem to nuts and go and do the thing and launch the company. And then on this side, I'm surrounded by, folks older than me who like to have a meeting about the meeting to plan the next meeting after that, and they feel like they have to walk through all these meetings and then execute. And a year from now, they're still talking about what they're going to do.
Right.
But then there's wisdom in this conversation, and there's naivete in this conversation. And where do they meet up? Where do the sages meet the soldiers and come up with a comprehensive thing that is mutually respectful and comprehensive and effective.
Well, how do you balance uh, collaboration versus competition, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know how because I think right now the future is built on those that can collaborate, that can work together to achieve something bigger than themselves, right?
Yeah.
You know, and versus we've been taught through this archaic system to compete with one another, right? You're competing for that job. We've created artificial scarcity in a system that is now digital, that is infinite. There is no scarcity in the digital age. There's no shortage of digits. There's no shortage of ones and zeros, right? So I think collaboration to achieve an end becomes what we want out of this new society. Is what we want to create out of this growing community. Not competing for scarce resources like we did 100,000 years ago, but how do we collaborate to build the future that we want, right? Number one, we have to know each other, right? You have to be in concert with one another. You have to be in communication with one another. So building silos is not going to get us there. What's going to get us there is people, to your point, being exposed to different possibilities, showing the wide breadth and width of what's available to them, and then working with other people around the world. I mean, I'm working with a guy out of Greece right now that I would never have met if it wasn't for this type of technology intervening. So I think for us being able to collaborate to achieve something that we want to achieve that's bigger than what we can achieve on our own is a very important starting point for that thought process, right? And unprogramming kids from a system that is broken and doesn't work for them anymore. It works to make a lot of people some money, you know, $3 billion in certain school systems, but it's not working to educate kids for the job market and for that's available to them. Because I was literally trained at school to go to work for somebody else. It wasn't until I changed schools and got around a different socioeconomic group that the educational process changed and the cultural process changed about not working for someone, but about owning your business, right? About putting a shingle outside your door, about becoming a doctor or a lawyer, or, oh, what business does your dad own? Not what job does your dad have? That just those type of little conversations really changes things, you know, changes how you look at the world.
Yeah.
You know, was your dad an accountant? Is your dad a lawyer? Is your mom a doctor? Is your, you know, these are, you know, I went from everybody working at the factory at GM to everybody's parents having a shingle with their name on it.
Yeah.
You know, and that totally changed my perspective of the world and what I could be and what opportunities I had and what I was exposed to. Right? You know, if you turn 16 and your dad buys you a BMW, that's very different than saving up for the next 2 years for you to buy a car and I'll match you.
Right. Teach a man how to fish. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are two very different conversations, you know?
Absolutely.
So I think what we can do now is take technology and use it to our benefit, and taking this opportunity to really have conversations about rethinking about how we educate people. And I think all the tools are there, you know? And I think COVID has given us lemons, but we can make lemonade out of it.
Right on. I agree.
I do want to open it up to see if we have any quick questions here before we wrap it up. So, hey, Matthew, Blair, Victor, do you have any questions for Kari or Lee? And at this point, since it's just a few of us, feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
I'll go ahead and start if that's okay. So question to both of you. I know I've talked to Lee about this a little bit, but Kari as well. The people that are sitting on the phone or listening to this later at the recording, what if we're like, yeah, that sounds great. I'd like to be a part of that. I'd like to help you out. What would you say is first steps of, you know, getting out there in their community to help out with that? Like, what would you give for a recommendation for taking those first steps?
I think it's a great question. You know, one of the roadblocks for Coleman Young Foundation always comes up when we have conversations about our work with folks who are familiar with the history of Coleman Young, and then the blockage comes up depending on what side of 8 Mile you grew up on. You know, if you're a city resident with a history or a lineage that comes from Detroit proper, you love Coleman Young. If you grew up in the suburbs, you probably grew up in a household with folks who questioned him or didn't like him. Tends to be very little gray area. But we always ask folks to help folks understand that, one, politicians are never as simple as the headlines around them. And Coleman Young was many things, but he was without a doubt a lover of Detroit and a lover of Detroit kids. And when he started this foundation, he himself was one of the mentors, as well as the founder. And I think it says a lot that the one non-political thing or apolitical thing he did with his career, a 50-year career of service, was to take his remaining wealth, which at that time was in his war chest. Politicians then could retire on that money. Like famous names like the Nolenbergs. They retired on their campaign treasuries in some cases, and that was their right. Mayor Young gave the vast majority of his to Wayne State University, where the Coleman Young Endowed Chair still exists. And then he endowed the seed funding for Coleman A. Young Foundation. He is essentially my employer, right? So 38 years later, and his charge to us was to never get political, only focus on changing kids' lives. And then he moved into a 1-bedroom apartment and died 4 years after he left office, contrary to whatever the headlines said. We want folks to know that in starting this foundation, he galvanized folks on both sides of the aisle. The Millikens were very close to him. Nobody cried harder than Governor Bill Milliken when he died. And we stand today as his lasting legacy. But the main thing is, we have one goal and one goal only, and that's to help young people. I don't know if Jack, I don't know if you have the slide that I sent in, but it was just a snapshot of some of the popular faces that we've helped. We're real proud of what some of our kids are doing. One, Hanan Yahya is working as a policy consultant for City Councilwoman Raquel Castaneda Lopez, and Lance Woods is co-founder of We Run 313, which is the largest run group in the city of Detroit. And they just started in March of 2019. So we've got some kids doing some amazing things. And 90% of these kids graduate from college, when they come to us, and 60% of the graduates come back to the city. So, really, I could really go on and on about the benefits that some of our kids have gleaned from involvement in Coleman A. Young Foundation. But to answer your question, things you could do to help, just spread the word about what we do. Invite people to visit the website and encourage people to support us. It's so cliche when folks say we're here for the kids, right? But the proof is in the pudding. That's what we do. There's Lance and Hanan and Brian. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm going to stay focused just on gaming because I could go really broad, but I'm going to stay focused on this. What we could do in the gaming community is be role models, right? What we could do in the gaming community when we're out socially with other gamers is set a positive example, right? Be welcoming to people that normally you don't interact with. Invite people over to your table for a game. That's been my secret this whole time, is just making myself accessible with a smile and a handshake, which I probably won't do in 2021, but I will smile. I won't be shaking hands.
Right.
Because con crud was the thing before COVID. So, but what we can do is always have an extra seat at our table for people. And that's made the difference in the gaming community for me. And I think that what we can, and what you can do, particularly as a white male, is challenge that stereotype that that the type of gaming we do is only for other white males, right? Because we know that's not the case. There's more people that want to play it. We started the Women of Windsor's wargaming group, and those girls can kick anybody's butt. So I think that that what we can do as males and as gamers is make sure that people that aren't male are welcome, feel welcome. Even if they don't want to play, you make sure that that they know that they have a place at the table, and I think that makes the hobby more friendly and safer and more enjoyable for all of us. So that's what I would recommend, just as a, the basement, and then we work our way up from there, because all the benefits, all the fruit that falls from that tree when you plant that seed of making a safe space for people to come and sit down and be themselves and play, I think is it all stems from that single point, from that seed that you plant around, hey, come down, have fun, I'll teach you this, yes, no problem, oh, make a mistake, yeah, no problem, because I know a lot of people, especially when it comes in the Warhammer community, everybody's afraid of making a mistake or getting a rule wrong, and Warhammer changes the rules like every 10 minutes, and it's mind-numbing to me, which is why I wrote my own rule system, and having 1.5 billion models to play a game, it's ridiculous. But anyway, I'm on a tirade. But that's one thing that can be done, that we all can do, is set a place at the table for others.
Right on.
Any other questions?
Jack, I think you're muted.
Yeah, Blair or Victor, any last second questions here? All right, thanks guys. Hey, Kari and Lee, I'm very grateful for your time, for you being here, sharing everything. This conversation, this discussion has been very interesting, and I'm glad that we can work together to create this content. I'll share it with you in the near future, and it's something that we can put out to our networks and our communities. And Matthew, Blair, Victor, thank you for being in the audience today. Thank you for your time. And hey, for now, we're going to close this off. But hey, we will get through this. We will make it. And education, I think the takeaway I'm getting here, of course, we have technology, and I like what Lee was saying about a computer has infinite more patience than a teacher does. But as far as Matthew, you're saying, hey, what can we do? And I think finding some sort of mentorship or teaching role or leadership role to these young people, or at least showing them that what is possible in this world through what we've achieved, and through our own works, it kind of speaks for itself. So hey, again, thank you for everybody for being here. Keep a lookout for future DNU Tech events, and until next time, that's all, folks.
Thank you, man.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting.
Hey, everybody.